Seven Blue Skies channel presents a new Dr. Rifat Ismail adventure, Paranormal, Book 5, Part 1, Legend of the Living Dead, by Dr. Ahmed Khaled Tawfiq. Introduction. Who is the one who spent the night next to Count Dracula's mummy? Who struggled on the ice with the mutilated werewolf under the moonlight in Romania? Who answered the call of the demon caller and managed to make it back? The answer is one and the same. Who is the one who pulled the sacrifice from the Loch Ness Monster? Who pulled off a break-in entry into a cannibal's apartment at midnight? You know the answer. It's me, Dr. Rifat Ismail. Who dared to challenge Dr. Lucifer? Who entered Frankenstein's castle? It's me, the lucky old man who remained unscathed except by the effect of the years. And who fell alone into the trap of the living dead with their frightful, eaten zombie faces? Of course, it's me. And how? Turn on the lights, close the door, and listen to what I have to say. 1. In the Antilles. It's 1:50 a.m., and the damned engine refuses to start. Harry searches hundreds of times for what's wrong, and steps on the accelerator multiple times. He checks the dashboard in vain. The car is totally dead. And what a time! And what a place! A few meters away, the headstones shine with their depressing poetry as the silvery, cold moonlight reflects upon them. And a wolf howls somewhere in the distance, answered by another one somewhere else. And Harry swallows hard, and his voice is strained in the darkness of the car as he speaks. Anyway, we're safe here. Let's wait until dawn. There's no other way. Something moves in the darkness. It's slowly coming closer, creeping nearby. But it's not a ghost. It's actually a man wearing a raggedy undershirt and ripped jeans, a straw hat on his head which obscures his features from us. But he's getting very close, and he will definitely offer us help and shelter. And suddenly, Harry's body tenses up and his eyes widen as he screams, "Rifat! Roll up your window and lock the door." And while rolling up his own window, he shouts, "Did you see his hands? They're half-eaten, with the bones protruding. He's not alive." The thing still moves towards us at the same slow speed as Harry continues, "It's a zombie." And now, let's leave off from this desperate situation and how we'll escape it. And come with me to a place which none of you may ever see in your life. Come to the Caribbean islands. Come to the tropics with the equatorial sun and calypso dances in the moonlight. Come to the rhythmic drums, and the banana groves, and the beautiful dark and smiling faces and the hot blood. Come to the Antilles. I introduce you first to this handsome blond young man whom you had seen with me in the car. He is an American computer engineer named Harry Sheldon. And don't let that word computer pass you by unnoticed, because at that time, 1965, it was basically unknown to us. From it leaked legendary smells, and it was intimidating, like some kind of witchcraft machine. And even these days, some countries define an illiterate person as one who understands fewer than 2 computer programming languages. This is Harry Sheldon. And now come, allow me to introduce you to this pretty and funny lady. And don't look at me like that. She's not my girlfriend. Her name is Linda, and she is Harry's wife. And as you can see, she is very, very American. And as for this little devil who kicks you with his foot and sticks out his tongue, he is their son Jimmy, who is 4 years old. It was Harry's idea to take me with them, from Florida, to spend some days in Jamaica, and I think you would agree that it is a once-in-a-lifetime trip for me, especially as I would accompany this sweet family so keen on enjoying life. While praising his idea, Harry told me, "They will be unforgettable days, kid. You'll see." And if we ignore his decidedly American habit of calling me kid, even though he's 18 years younger than me, you'll find that he was truthful in every word, for they would truly be unforgettable days. "And now," I said, "come, Harry, tell me about Jamaica. I know it's an island in the West Indies which stretched north to Florida and south to Venezuela, a bow-shaped distance of about 3,200 kilometers. "Yeah," he replied. "I did go to elementary school." Anyway, you know that Columbus tried to prove the earth is round by sailing west, expecting to reach India. Of course. Well, after a terrible voyage, in 1492 Columbus reached a hot land inhabited by dark-skinned people, and so he thought, and I can't blame him, that he had reached India. The poor man didn't realize he had landed in the Bahamas on Watling Island, which is now called San Salvador. And after that he discovered Hispaniola. And he didn't realize his mistake? I asked. Actually, he did. And unfortunately, he realized he had proven nothing. He became a mockery to the point that people called him the Admiral of the Mosquito Land. And he died in poverty, without knowing he had found the New World in these islands, the West Indies. And even the honor of being the namesake for the New World was given to the explorer Amerigo Vespucci, whose name gave rise to the word America. But the country of Colombia is named after Columbus, I remarked. That's true, but the whole continent was his for the taking. And what an injustice! Well, what are these islands called? I asked. While mussing his son's hair, Harry answered, The West Indies Federation includes 10 islands, except that in the year 1962, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago separated from the Union and its capital moved to Barbados. And so what are the Antilles Islands? I prompted. The Antilles are a group of volcanic islands, the biggest being Cuba, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola, which contains Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And historically, the people of these islands were called the Carib, and that's why the sea and the islands were named the Caribbean. And we walked the streets of Kingston, the capital of Jamaica. Jamaica, the small island of 11,000 square kilometers and population of 1.86 million. So don't expect the capital to be huge and shiny. It's not New York City, for example, but in spite of that, it holds a special magic. The tropical storms bring non-stop rain all year long, and besides that, the average temperature is very high, reaching 80+ Fahrenheit. The scene speaks of clear poverty and misery, the same features I've seen everywhere. The faded, ugly faces you see in the Himalayan mountains or in a village market in Uganda. Distinguished features only appear where richness and luxury exist. As for poverty and misery, they make all faces look alike everywhere in the world. The same tortured looks and the same skinny kids on their dirt piles, this one with raggedy clothes, and the weary, faded mothers. This bleak atmosphere succeeded in shutting down the engine of our enthusiasm. Jamaica, for sure, is no postcard on which men and women dance around banana trees. But Harry and Linda, it seemed, insisted on enjoying all this misery so foreign to them in Florida. And they saw in all of this a special authentic charm, which made me quite unhappy. And, even worse, I know from my work that all of these countries are rife with leprosy, cholera, plagues, malaria, and, not to mention the Chagas disease, the curse of these wretched countries with no cure in sight. Its carrier is a very ugly bug. God help us, I said to myself out loud in Arabic while thinking of the disasters awaiting me. By some miracle I may survive 3 or 4 of them, but the rest will definitely attack me. Overhearing me, Linda asked, What were you saying? Nothing. I was taken by our beautiful surroundings, I said dryly, and we walked on in the rain. 2. Unwanted Guest. And now, I say, let's drink some rum, Harry announced while we sat at the table, as Linda put new film in the camera. The atmosphere in the cafe was stifling and humid. The darkness of night spread over the city like a heavy coat filled with holes, a canopy of street lights. I declined drinking, of course, and in English asked the waiter to bring me a lemonade. He didn't understand me, of course, and just stared at me stupidly, which was annoying. In French, Harry told him to bring some rum for them and lemonade for me. He then turned to me and smiled, saying, They don't all speak English here, kid. They speak French? Their language is not French exactly. The dialect is a mixture of French, Spanish, and English, meaning you have to try everything before getting a result. And he took the camera from Linda to refill it himself and said, These islands witnessed occupation by the French, Spanish, and Dutch. That's why it has something from all of them. And also its proximity to the U.S. made English a decent base for their language. I get it, I said, and luckily my French will do the job. True, I'm not fluent, but I don't think I'll meet any professors from the Sorbonne here. What I know gives me a minimal linguistic base, and that's enough. Harry laughed and looked at Linda in wonder, and then he asked me, "And what is the minimal level of linguistic security?" Cleverly, I said, "The minimal level for any language prevents one from dying of hunger, sleeping outdoors, or going to jail. That's why the first thing I learn from any language is sentences like, 'Where is the hotel? How much? I want to eat. Where's the police station? Where's the airport? No pork and no alcohol, please.'" "You forgot the most important one," said Harry. "Yeah, and what's that?" "Where's the bathroom?" he answered. "It'll save you a lot of trouble." "I didn't forget it," I said. "I just didn't want to mention it in front of Linda. And then there's the sentence, 'I want to call my country's consulate,' which is very necessary if you don't want to spend the rest of your life in one of these Trinidadian caves, or in a Sicilian prison. There are a lot of countries in the world, each with their own laws, and it's hard not to make a mistake on some law whose existence you don't even imagine." "I don't get it," said Harry. "Stealing, robbing, and killing are crimes in all countries, no matter how they differ. Laws are something people instinctively understand. For example, in Ohio it's against the law to kick a dog on a Sunday. And now imagine yourself walking in Ohio on a Sunday. The streets are practically empty, and suddenly, bam, get bitten by a dog. What would you do? Of course you would kick it. Then a couple of cops grab you by the neck and carry you off to prison. It's an easy thing. Now what would you do if you didn't know the sentence, 'I want to speak to the consulate,' in English?" I couldn't answer. This information had surprised me, and it seemed to me that as long as I live I would never know everything. Actually, I would become even more ignorant about this strange character, the human being. But it's another interesting experience to add to my life experiences. And if there's ever a chance for me to go to Ohio on a Sunday, remind me not to kick any dog which bites me. Here the waiter brought what we had ordered, so we sat drinking. The cafe lacked class. Its level was below a cafeteria, but higher, fortunately, than that of a dirty bar. And the customers consisted of men and women spread about the tables, speaking a language foreign to my ears. And there was an old jukebox wafting bleak notes which invited sleep. And here a bearded black giant wearing a colorful Hawaiian shirt. Frankly, I don't know how he had the courage to wear it. He stood by the bar, sipping from a big cup, joking with the bartender. And there were 3 pretty, dark-skinned girls standing next to him, blabbering and drinking mango juice. And the pale and skinny bartender running here and there, like a fly in a sugar factory. The hour was nearing 11 p.m. It was time to leave, and sleep in my comfortable bed. And suddenly, silence overtook the place. No one was chatting any more, though the jukebox carried on with its bleak melodies. All eyes froze in their sockets. The bartender stiffened and stood still, a look of shock on his face. The 3 pretty girls took a shaky step backwards. A cup fell from someone's hand, breaking on the floor. Even the giant, who could scare the devil himself, retreated, his eyes not leaving that thing which had entered. Nothing moved in this place. Even the tobacco smoke seemed frozen of fear in mid-air. And instinctively we looked at the one who had entered, to see what was happening. That thing was a thin-built man walking slowly between the tables. His head was bandaged with dirty gauze, and he wore a faded shirt and baggy, ripped pants. He seemed too weak to scare even a child. And when he passed our table, I began to understand. The stench coming from him. And his hands. His hands amazed me most of all. He practically had no fingers, the stubs revealing naked white bones. And his feet were the same. You could see the tendons and bones and... He lifted his head, and I saw his face. This strange grayish color, and the hooked nose, and the decaying teeth. And in his left eye socket there was no eye, just an ugly black hole. And his flesh was filled with wrinkles. And I started realizing why all these people were terrified. This thing I was seeing had only one explanation. This man was one of the living dead. and that thing moved towards the bar, while everyone made space for him, without daring to turn their backs on him, all of them retreating backwards, their eyes not leaving him. And behind the bartender stood shaking as that creature made his way to the bar and stood in front of him, as if awaiting something already agreed upon. And with frantic movements the bartender started pouring rum into a big cup, and he spilled twice as much on the bar than in the cup. And I don't blame him, if I put myself in his place, as that thing was only a few meters away, looking at him curiously with one yellow eye. And the thing took the cup with his ravaged, bony hand and started drinking eagerly. Then he threw it on the table, asking for more, which the bartender understood immediately. He started refilling the cup before it was put in front of him. I looked from the corner of my eye at Harry, and I saw him turning the camera, his eyes steady on the scene. He chose the widest frame and speed B, which allowed him a longer exposure time, basically meaning he was ready to take a picture in this dim light, without a flash. "Mommy, I'm scared!" Jimmy cried, while burying his head in Linda's chest. She stroked his hair gently and comforted him, but her eyes never left that creature. It was a horrifying experience for a child of that age. Harry lifted the camera slowly to his eyes and steadied his elbow on the table to tame his shaky hands, especially given the slow speed of the camera. And he held his breath as the waiter standing near us whispered to him in French, "Mister, for God's sake, don't do it." Harry answered quietly while adjusting the focus, "And why not? He won't see the flash." "He will know. The Dowmas knows everything." "So his name is Dowmas?" Harry whispered. "And they know him and are used to him. And this Dowmas plays the role of a notorious bully or thug, both of whom demonstrate their power by intimidation, the fear of his physical power and strength in the case of a bully, or the fear of his heinous looks in Dowmas's case. Anyway, he managed to scare us." The terror spreading through the room was another example of the psychosomatic response psychologists speak of. This phenomenon explains the psychological contagion that often happens in cases of fear or laughter or depression. For when one soldier screams, "To war!" the enthusiasm spreads through the whole platoon. And when two people laugh in front of you, you find yourself laughing as well, without even knowing the joke. And when fear reaches everyone in this place, it infects us too, though we don't even know the reason for their horror. And click! After adjusting his aim, Harry took the picture, and he continued holding his breath for a few seconds before taking his finger off the button. And then he lifted the camera for another shot. "Enough, Harry," I hissed, though I understood he wanted to take a few shots because pictures taken at these low speeds often fail. Click! Click! The creature drained the cup and put it down violently on the bar, and I again noticed his bony hand reaching for his shirt pocket, searching for something. And then his hand emerged holding something, a coin he offered to the bartender. I have never in my life seen a mutant with such integrity, a freak whose pride compels him to pay a fair price for the rum he drank. But the bartender retreated in disgust and fear. He wanted nothing more from this devil than to leave him alone. Dowmas threw the coin on the bar, and it spun a few times on its edge before falling, clattering, a sound quite horrifying to us. Then he turned and made his way swaying between the tables. Everyone made way for him, not daring to make any sudden movements. He walked slowly towards our table. "Mommy, he's coming! He's going to eat us!" cried little Jimmy into the folds of his mom's clothes, trying to hide or drop out of existence completely. Bravely, she held him even closer. And Harry still held the camera when that thing stood in front of us, even uglier at this distance. His one eye was fixed on the camera, and slowly he lifted the bony stump of his index finger to Harry, and his arm shook as he hissed like a snake in broken English. Give it!" 3. The Fortune Teller. Silence prevailed, and everyone tensed up. Harry stood up, his muscles flexed. In real anger he shouted loudly, "Listen, you clown! I don't know what dirty place you come from, but I'm not afraid of you. Anyway, I'm not giving you the camera." The freak's body stiffened, so he stood for a second silently, as if considering his next move. I thought I should do something to prove I was there, so I stood up as well, next to Harry, puffing out my chest muscles, acting as if I only felt anger, not fear. Moments passed as wills collided, and it looked like this situation would continue on forever, until one of us dies, if that thing is even capable of dying. And then, with his yellow eye, he gave me a look I will never forget, and afterwards a long look at Linda, who sat tensely. The ugliest and most heinous look I've seen in my life. And then he turned and slowly walked out the door and disappeared into the darkness. We stood silently for a while before our breathing eased, and we heard the waiter breaking the cup which had been tainted by that disgusting thing. And sounds of cheers and congrats rose from the customers, thanking me and Harry for standing up to that repulsive creature. The skinny waiter came over to Harry, whose shoulders took on a proud posture, and said in French, "You're very brave, sir, but I advise you to stay clear of the Dalmas, 'cause he's a zombie, and zombies don't forgive and forget. You need to leave the island immediately and get your family back to the U.S." And then he shivered in disgust as he said, "He gave your wife an evil, threatening look. Didn't you notice?" It was a message which needs no translation. As we took the stairs of the hotel, the San Ramon Hotel, Harry remarked, "It's strange that he heard the click of the camera and knew we were photographing him. He looked so out of it, unaware of anything much." And then he put his hand on Linda's shoulder and took Jimmy's half-asleep hand. Breathing hard, following them, I said, "Anyway, he seemed relatively civil as freaks go. He understands the art of choreography and plays to his strength." "Oh yeah, real classy," Harry quipped. And at his hotel room he put the key into the door and wished me a good night. Jokingly, I said, "Anyway, be careful. We still have the film, and as the story always goes, the fearful gang will chase you because the film contains something the gang doesn't want anyone to see. Or, if it's a horror story, that freak will enter your room through the window tonight, intending to destroy you and the film." "What a good friend you are," Harry said, slapping me on the shoulder, almost dislocating it. And he went into the room with his family. And now I go to my room. It's not very luxurious, but it's comfortable. The AC seems to work okay. An acceptably comfortable bed. So now I lie in bed feeling that particular ecstasy you feel when you take off your shoes after a long day and bury your hot feet under the cold covers and... Someone knocked cautiously at the door. I stood up heavily, practically certain that I would find Brother Dalmas standing there, staring at me with his ugly black eye cavity. Carefully I unlocked the door and found a skinny, light-complexioned young man standing tensely and politely, as though waiting for permission to enter. As I looked at him in wonder, he spoke in bad French. "Hello, mister. I'm Gabriel. I'm in room service here. Can I come in?" "I didn't order room service, son," I said, and went to close the door. But he persisted like a beggar, saying, "Listen, it's an important and urgent matter." I thought for a moment and found no harm in hearing what this kid had to say, so I allowed him in, aiming at a chair for him. Sitting comfortably, he exhaled and thanked me a few times. Yeah, I said shortly. "Now, say what you came here to say." "You took a picture of the zombie Dalmas. Now, don't ask me how I know. Let's just say I have my sources. But I came to warn you. You must leave Jamaica within hours. Go to any other country." I lit a cigarette and asked, "Is that a threat?" He answered immediately, No, it's just a warning of what will happen tomorrow if you don't take my advice. It will be unbelievably terrible, and I would hate for it to be said that I let this tragedy happen while knowing it was preventable." I exhaled cigarette smoke roughly, quite annoyed at his manner. Looks like our first night on this island will be an entirely unhappy one. "There are a lot of things I don't understand," I started. "For example, who exactly is this Dalmas? And what does this word zombie mean? You keep mentioning it as if it's a standard entry in any dictionary. And another thing, what's the problem with taking an innocent photo?" He thought for a second, then asked carefully, "Do you trust me, sir?" "Well, yeah, I trust you as much as anyone I met for the first time just 15 minutes ago." "Good," he said. "Then get dressed and come with me to meet someone who will explain everything." Maybe he didn't get my sarcasm. But the temptation overcame me. Why not continue this thing to the end? It is an interesting situation. Plus, this kid is skinny and not strong enough to hurt me, at least not with his bare hands. Add to that, I had reached that level of tiredness in which the sleep flies away from your eyes. I'm not going to wake up Harry because this whole thing might be just a big joke. And how would I look then? So, where are we going? I asked the kid. To the alley behind the hotel. I have an apartment there. Okay, I said. Give me a few minutes to change clothes. And I showed him out. Then I changed clothes and did not forget, of course, to put my gun in my pocket. The gun they had not noticed in customs, especially since those metal detector machines didn't exist in those happy days, back before hijacking airplanes became trendy. On a small piece of paper I wrote in clear handwriting, Harry, I've gone with Gabriel, the bellboy, to his place in the alley behind the hotel. I hope you can save me. And closing the door behind me, I joined Gabriel outside. And at the threshold of Harry's door, in front of Gabriel's surprised eyes, I bent down and slid the paper underneath the door. For a second the kid looked confused, but then his face lit up with understanding, and he said, Aha, you're telling your friend where we're going. Being cautious. Oh, forgive me, I didn't realize you were a genius. He smiled and told me, It's a good idea, but on one condition. That my name really is Gabriel, and that my house really is behind the hotel. You don't know anything about me except what I've told you. But in that case there are other solutions, like the gun in your pocket. And he pointed at the bulge of my gun in my pants pocket and continued, I don't blame you for taking precautions, but this whole thing is really not complicated. It will only take a few minutes, and then you'll be back. Trust me. And we entered the dark alleys with their stray dogs barking in the distance. So what if he knows I have a gun? It only has 2 bullets in it, as I haven't bought ammunition since I bought it. His apartment, with its ugly furniture, smelled stuffy. In the living room he introduced me to an old black woman with many missing teeth and a face full of wrinkles. Her fingernails were long, like claws, and a repulsive smell emanated from her. In her ears were huge hoop earrings. I'm Mother Marcia. Please introduce yourself, she demanded, as I don't know your name. I'm Rifat Ismail, a doctor. She shook my hand with her claw and asked me to sit. And then she lit up a thick cigar, took a couple of professional drags from it, and took a big swig from the bottle next to her while the kid sat by proudly, exclaiming, My mother is an expert in voodoo rituals. What? Voodoo, Gabriel answered. It's the black magic practiced on the Antilles Islands. And they all will tell you my mom is a very good voodoo witch. A very good witch? I stammered. The old woman turned her gray eyes on me and stared like a hawk. She was happy with her son's flattery, and with the look of fear in my eyes. What's happening to me? What kind of devil is chasing me such that I put myself in all these troubles? On one occasion I fight with a werewolf, and another time I hunt a mythical creature, and another time I sneak into a cannibal's apartment at night. And now I'm in a crappy apartment after midnight in Jamaica with a witch who is an expert in the black magic arts? After about a minute, her voice sounding like a coffin lid closing, the old woman said in French, So, white boy, you have challenged a zombie, eh? White? My color is more or less bronze, which gives me a lot of problems. I look foreign wherever I go. In Nigeria, they called me the abusive whitey, and in England they referred to me as the dumb darky, and even Alfred at Loch Ness cursed me as he lay dying. Damn you, you English dog! In broken French I spoke to the old woman. If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Marcia, but she cut me off. My name is Mother Marcia. Okay, Mother Marcia, I said carefully, and then went on. I don't understand who these zombies are exactly. Considering, she looked at me in the dim lamplight and then said, They are called zombies here in Jamaica. In Tobago and Barbados they call them the living dead. And I think you can understand the latter name, right? Yes, linguistically, yes. Looking at me with concentration, she said, Every time a magician performs black magic behind the river, someone dies. And after 3 days they leave their graves in the dark. And then they call them zombies. And everyone knows about them, what they look like, but no one dares to talk to them, because zombies don't like to be touched, spoken to, or bothered by anyone. Otherwise, beware. You see, the zombie is forever cursed. He knows nothing of eternal rest, just roams the earth. His wife and old friends fear him. He decays while alive. He doesn't drink, doesn't eat, doesn't sleep. But that Dalmas was drinking like a sponge, I interjected. Of course, she answered, unmoved. Old habits die hard, and sometimes cling to them from their former lives. Dalmas was a drunk all his life, and that's why he still repeats his old habits. And is he the only zombie around here? I asked. No, there are 3 here in Kingston, and many more in nearby villages. She then smiled cruelly and whispered, You don't believe it. I can see it in your eyes. Thinking of how to respond, I swallowed hard and then decided to speak frankly. Listen, Mother, I know what I'm going to say will upset you, but I'm going to say it anyways. Religion assures us of the existence of black magic, but denies the ability to prevent any creature from his timed death. Immortality is a quality of God alone, and for us there's no such thing as immortality in this earthly life, and He is the only one who gives us immortality in the afterlife. The old witch stiffened up again, and I realized my night would not pass peacefully, and that I would definitely be turned into a flea or a pig or some such thing, which I would not enjoy. After a few seconds she reached with her bony arm to a burlap sack on a small table next to her, and retrieved a stack of old, tattered cards, their appearance telling of long usage. I know these cards. I know their mysterious drawings and bleak symbols. These are the tarot cards, the ones magicians and witches always have handy. Years later, I would live another bitter story with these cards and with Dr. Lucifer. And I'll tell you that story in detail, explaining these ominous cards. Someday. After removing the rubber band binding them, she handed me the cards and said in between puffs on her cigar, Shuffle them. Clear your mind of everything except the zombie and today's events. The cards smelled of spices and something else, something unfamiliar. I started shuffling the cards, making a concerted effort to direct my thoughts as she had asked, despite my belief in the silliness of this whole thing. And now, Mother Marcia demanded, give them to me. She took the cards from me and placed them in a certain order on the table. She considered and chewed the cigar in her toothless mouth. A professional witch who knows exactly what she's doing, apparently. The castle, the queen, then the wolf, then the queen, then... And I noticed the last card. The card representing death. A picture of a skeleton holding a sickle, harvesting heads. Whatever the meaning of this nonsense, it ends with death. And I heard her rough voice again as she said, Beware the trap of the living dead. There won't be others. You'll be buried alive. And when the noon sun is high, the castle will burn. And the wolf will howl in pain, because there won't be any others. After 2, maybe after 3. Many caves will be opened. But the red dust will cover his eyes, and he won't see. And 2 foreigners will die like dogs. In her French language, these words rhymed. She then dropped her head and started gathering the cards silently. I told her, This is all really cute, but what does it mean? She didn't answer. With a distracted look, she continued putting the cards back in the bag. I don't understand a single word. Won't you explain to me? Timidly, Gabriel cleared his throat. He had been as silent as a fish during the whole conversation. He definitely feared his mother a lot. And when he put his hand on my arm, I realized that my welcome here had ended. My mom doesn't like any talk after her tarot prophecies. Prophecies? All I heard from her was a piece of poetry worthy of Eliot. But if she wanted to warn me of something, it's normal to say what it is. That's my right. Gabriel's voice was suddenly stern, and his grip tightened on my arm as he said, She won't give you an answer. She leaves you to interpret what she said. And the next events will clearly remind you of her words, and then you'll know what to do. And now it's time to go back to the hotel." I sighed in surrender and followed him to the door, feeling disappointed in the time I wasted with this crazy woman, having gained nothing from it. And here I heard her rough voice calling me. "Remember!" I turned to her in surprise, and as she waved the death card in her hand, she said, "After 2, maybe 3.